to the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar, and today we kick off the show with a very special mission, the India Revival Mission, which actually talks about how India can now begin to find ways to exit the lockdown. Undoubtedly, life is the most precious thing. It's the biggest priority, and we required the lockdown to ensure we don't have huge numbers of mortality. India has done well relative to the world, and everyone has acknowledged it. But what comes next is the big question.
"40 days and counting. That is how long India will be in lockdown. A lockdown that has possibly saved thousands of lives. But the lockdown is now beginning to have serious impact. Job losses, businesses shutting down, manufacturing plants falling silent. The impact on the economy has been devastating. As per one survey, 47% of SMEs and startups say they have less than a month's cash left to run their businesses. Many are already out of funds. Only 6% of SMEs have enough funds to last another 6 months. For the middle class, the fear of job cuts loom, and a 3-month pause on EMIs brings little relief. Meanwhile, lakhs of migrant workers and contract labor stare at an uncertain future. India has done well in the first leg of the battle. Numbers of those infected and killed by the deadly COVID-19 pandemic have been contained because of early steps. But now the need of the hour is to save livelihood along with lives. Join the Times Network as we begin the India Revival Mission, so that India survives, revives, and thrives.
To speak more about this, I'm joined now by Mr. Kaushik Basu, was renowned Indian economist and was the chief economist of the World Bank as well. Mr. Basu, pleasure to speak with you on the show once again. Let me just begin by getting your take on this lives versus livelihood debate that we have seen raging on for days now.
Tamanna, thank you very much for giving me the chance to speak. Very good to do so. So the debate in the beginning was being posed in terms of lives versus the economy, which gave an artificial impression that one was about really living and the other was about the stock market. But it is far from that. The economy is important for our lives and livelihood. And I feel the way India has gone, the first steps were right. You do want to bring in discipline into people's interaction with one another. You want to have a lockdown whereby the spread is kept under control. But you have to keep the economy in mind throughout. And because otherwise you will lose lives, and one has to keep in mind that lives that are lost to COVID are usually recorded pretty well because it's happening because of a disease, but lives which are from people beginning to wither away because food is not reaching them, those get recorded much slower. So there is a genuine risk that among the poorest people, the migrants, it'll begin to hit and we will be too late. So we face a choice here, a very difficult choice, but I do have some advice for India. Because at one level, India's prospects are excellent. Two particular sectors. You know, the world, when it comes out of the pandemic, the health sector is going to be a major sector. I feel all over the world, the way IT became a major sector in the 1990s, I feel health is going to be a major sector. India has some initial advantages there. From the preparation of vaccines to generic drugs, India is quite a major player. So if we do well, we can come out big there. Outsourcing and information technology, we have data that it's crashing right now because firms are closed, people are not doing this. But everyone expects this is going to get a surge in the future. And India has an advantage over there. But for that, we need an exit strategy from the lockdown. Yes. A strong one, better one, quicker one, well-defined one. So there's a lot of work to be done there. And I think there are some very big risks which we cannot overlook. The market is beginning to show up numbers from which there are the risks that we may end up doing a damage to the economy, which will be a great tragedy because our first steps with the COVID were right, because our prospects are great, but we could end up killing the economy.
No, so, we have had nations which have opened up.
Yeah.
And then suddenly seen a rebound of numbers as well.
Yeah.
So clearly that is, the concern. And it is nobody's argument here that, open up the hotspot tomorrow and let people go to restaurants, etc.
Right.
But do you think that we are perhaps dragging our feet a bit on the economic side of it? Simple things, simple tasks now just cannot happen. And to unlock an economy will also take time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to actually give concrete examples. From the 3rd of May, I feel there should be very clear signals going out that, of course, a lot of the lockdown will have to remain, but details will have to go down. And we have evidence from the past. One sector where the lockdown will have to remain for quite some time, from the studies of Spanish flu, 1918, the mega pandemic, we know that schools had opened up too quickly. Those days, the schools had opened up after a month, and I do feel that schools should remain closed, and this should be a clear announcement, say till June, the middle of June, because there are formal studies showing that if the schools had been closed for 3 months during the Spanish flu, the spread would have been less. So that will have to remain locked down. But workers will have to get to their workplace. And there are countries which are beginning to give out messages. Thailand has announced that transportation is going to open up carefully so that people are able to use their buses, cars begin to move. You can't get together in one place, large number, but you are beginning to open up mobility. Vietnam is giving out signals, and we can see in the data that the market is reacting to that. Foreign capital outflow from India is bigger than from any other emerging economy taking place. And I think because global players are beginning to worry that India's private sector is going to be strangled if we do not begin to open up intelligently. In the month of March, $15 billion of foreign capital exited India, which has never happened before during the period that we record foreign exchange flows, never happened before. It's the biggest outflow out. The rupee is weaker than it has ever been before. These are all signals that global players, the private sector, they are beginning to get worried about India. And given that we have done things right, this is a juncture where there should be clear statements. We want to allow our factories to open up under precautions. There'll be rules about people getting together in one place.
Yes.
Allow transportation, but we will keep our schools closed. We won't allow big groups to gather. So it has to be a nuanced set of exit policies given out very clearly.
But let me come to the factories, Mr. Basu, because that was the plan. At the end of lockdown 1.0, when it was extended the first time round, that was the plan that from 20th of April, you would have some manufacturing plants open up. Now, the issue is two-pronged. One is that you can't possibly just open up in green zones. Supply chains are connected. Some of, your raw materials, etc., will come from what are orange and maybe red zones. Second is, where is the labor? And the third, if I may add, is where is the demand? What do I produce if I'm not sure anyone's going to buy?
The demand, let me address first. Take the software sector and the outsourcing sector, where people sit in offices and respond to international demand. There's been a big drop in demand, but there's also data coming in to show that because people can't get to their workplace, what demand there is, we are not being able to meet that demand. So demand is going to be low for sure. But we have to create the space so that whatever their demand is, our people are able to work, because capital is not going to wait endlessly even for 2 months. They will go to Vietnam, they will go to Mexico. There's again data coming that the Japanese government is putting a little bit more than $2 billion to facilitate Japanese firms to pull out of China. They are worried. But we know that these firms are planning to go primarily to Vietnam, to Mexico, to Thailand, to Malaysia. India does not figure in this. So we have to begin to open up. And it is true, demand won't be very big, but we are signaling to the world that we are ready to go. One more thing can I point out about the fear of corona and COVID. People are confounding the number. This is talking to friends, to business people all around. When it comes to corona fatalities, the number dying, per population, India actually is doing very well globally. So I don't know about how many people are infected, because for that our testing is not enough. But we do know the fatality. That is reasonably well measured, not perfectly. There, the fatality rate, and not just in India, across South Asia, across Africa, there are parts of Africa which is better than India. The fatality rates per population is 1/600th of what's happening in Europe. So not 1/6, not 1/60th, but 1/600th of what's happening. So yes, we have to be careful, and things can change in the future. But actually on fatality, India has not done that badly, actually has done pretty well, along with a lot of South Asian countries, African countries, and we have to take advantage of that. There are small risks when you are opening up, and we have to be candid, that infection spread could pick up a little bit. But we have a strange resistance, which we don't understand, that it does not become quite as severe as it has become in Europe when you're getting COVID. So yes, be careful, but don't also get into a fear psychosis, causing a psychological problem in society that we are seeing some signs of.
What about the damage that has already been done? The massive loss of, wealth, the massive loss of capital, the per day hit that we've been seeing to the GDP.
Yeah.
And perhaps there will be some businesses which won't survive this.
Yeah.
In a post-COVID world, they will find a long time to really find their feet. How do you see that situation panning out? And do you think that that kind of economic support needs to come in now?
Tamanna, we do need that kind of economic support, and that has to be a sort of fiscal support, more money being put into this. There, I feel a disproportionate effort has to go to the poor, because they are suffering. And as I said, unlike a COVID death, a lot of this suffering goes relatively unnoticed because it's a slow withering away. So the money has to be directed over there. But as far as the private sector goes, my concern is money is important. You do want to direct it to the sector suffering, to a lot of the informal sector. But beyond that, India has always a risk of a permit raj. It becomes a controlled sector where it does not flourish. You have to create space, frankly. The private sector in India can be very vibrant. So the important job now is to create the space for them to function, give subsidies to some sections, the poorest ones, the informal sector, but create space so that they can begin to get their workers to come in to work, the factories to open up, all under rules. The invisible hand we economists keep talking about, a controlled economy where the government tries to control it all, has not functioned through history. We have too many examples of that. So you have to allow the small firms, the private firms, just a space to function. A lot of the damage has been done across the world, and that damage we will have to live with. This was a pandemic where the world suffered. But I feel the next month is crucial because country after country are beginning to signal, capital, come back. We are ready to go. We are not signaling that well enough.
How do we signal that? A, and B, what is the extent that we can open up? Right now, there is this, orange, red, and green zone.
Yeah.
But even in the green zones and opening standalone stores, it's become a little unclear and haphazard.
Right.
Because there's so many layers of administration.
Yeah.
Even if the central government allows it, the state government allows it, the district administration, the local authorities may put a spanner in the works.
Right.
Is that bureaucratic hurdle a big issue?
It is a big issue, and this is one area where you need clarity as much as possible. Perfect clarity is not possible. It's a very difficult situation, but who are the ones who cannot operate? Who are the ones who can operate? Make it as clear as possible so that firms and small operators, small local stores don't get harassed unnecessarily because they don't fully understand what the rules are and the enforcers don't understand what the rules are, which is the classic problem of controlled economies. The rules are not that clear and the small businesses suffer because they don't fully understand and the enforcers take advantage of that. So make the rules as clear as possible and open up a lot of the sector. Schools remain closed, congregations remain closed, but vehicles should be allowed to move now. A whole lot of countries are doing that. Transportation should be eased up with rules in place that buses should not be overfull. And you can begin to deploy people and it'll really show India's organization. At major bus stops, there are officials standing, making sure that buses do not overfill. There are rules and enforcement of these things going on. Local trains begin to come in so that workers can come in, again with rules that compartments have to remain half full, and you can have stations being done. And these will give immediately signals to the world that India means business, that we want to play our COVID card very carefully. We don't want it to spread, but we also want to begin to operate. Come back to us.
I just wanted to get your take on the unemployment situation. The figures are, of course, bleak. There's a lot of data out there. We could be at about 21% of unemployment rate this week, as per one of the trackers that tracks it regularly. And this does not even take into account contract labor or a lot of unemployment in the informal sector. What can we do about this very, very quickly? We're, speaking towards the end of April.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know whether they will have any income at all by the first week of May.
Yeah.
How dangerous is that situation?
Very dangerous. Let me give you the numbers a little bit now. Unemployment, roughly the best sort of estimates that are coming in is 24% is where unemployment is, which is shockingly high. However, in the United States, it's probably 32%. The St. Louis Fed's calculation is second quarter US is going to 32%. But as you rightly point out, in India, there's also a lot of informal workers, self-employed workers, who do not show up under the unemployment statistics because they are self-employed. They are not formally looking for jobs, but they are without jobs. And this segment can be hit very badly. They are already being hit. Two lessons here. Direct support as much as possible. The money has to reach them while they are not getting their jobs. But the second one, and I'm stressing repeatedly, is beyond the point just supporting them with money and food and having a controlled economy. We've seen failures, mega failures in communist countries where they've tried to control and run this sector. You can't do that. So support them now for a short duration, give them food, give them money, reach it to them as directly as possible. A lot of it has to be food and healthcare, but allow the sectors to open up so that they get jobs. In India, a lot of the employment is self-employed people, tiny owners of operations. If you give them the space to go out, tell them you have to sit far away, they will get back into operations slowly. So again, make space. Don't try to sort of have the state support them fully from here onwards for the next 2 months. You will not succeed. And the pain and suffering, which is already immense among the poorest segments, is just going to get harder. The migrants are suffering. The informal sector is suffering in a big way. You have to reach out to them.
Last question, Mr. Basu. There's a lot of talk about when a vaccine will come in. Honestly, at this point, it's like gazing into a crystal ball. Yeah. But do you think that this whole move towards opening up again on a policy level, which will largely be on pause or will be moving very, very slowly till we don't know that there is a vaccine or a clear cure? And can we wait that long?
There is no choice in the matter. The vaccine could come in 6 months, but as some people say, it could be 3 years. If it is 3 years to a vaccine, you can't have a lockdown economy. There's going to be just famine across, not just in India, then it's going to go across the world. And I feel all over the world, countries are realizing if it is going to be 3 years or 2 years before the vaccine comes, you still have to operate. You have to have the rules so that it will spread, but you keep the spread under control. And there are now formal papers coming in where you say that the spread will happen, but the spread has to be that 1% infects less than 1% is the average. That is the rule you go for. So if the vaccine does not come in, let us say for 2 years, you can't have a lockdown economy for 2 years. You'll just perish. So you will have to open up whether or not the vaccine comes. If the vaccine comes, we open up with joy. If the vaccine does not come, we still have to open up, keeping a lot of sectors and behavior and practices closed, but we still have to open up. We just don't have a choice on that. And I think countries are realizing and recognizing that.
Well, that's a good point. It's not really about, if, it's about when we open up, and there really isn't much of a choice anymore because the devastation from staying locked out indefinitely could be much, much higher than even COVID. Thank you so much, Kaushik Basu, for speaking with us.